Worcester, Massachusetts, a farming settlement under the early colonists in the late 17th century, turned into a city of industry now labeled the heart of the Commonwealth. Being built upon wire and eventually barbed wire, the key to Worcester's establishment as an industrial center of the nation is the Washburn and Moen Company. Founded in 1822 as a collaboration between Ichabod Washburn and Benjamin Goddard, the Washburn and Goddard Company was a manufacturing firm in Worcester that provided Washburn the groundwork for his eventual success in wire. By 1836, the company owned the only wire factory in Worcester, and within a few years, this factory was producing half of all wire for the United States. By 1865, Washburn owned the largest wire factory in the world. Throughout these decades, the company went through several revisions as different partners worked together, finally incorporating as the Washburn and Moen Company in 1868. At the time of incorporation, the company consisted of North Works, located on Grove Street, Central Works in southern Worcester, and South Works in Quinsigamond Village, though South Works ceased operations within 6 years of incorporation. By 1889, Washburn and Moen had become the single largest employer within Worcester, with over 3,000 workers employed. When the company merged with the American Steel and Wire Company in 1899, that number grew to 200,000 across the city.
In 1862, the Homestead Act sent a multitude of pioneer settlers to the West, for whom fencing was crucial to protect their crops against range cattle and wild animals. Importing lumber to build wooden fences, however, was exorbitantly expensive, with the price to fence a small farm as high as $1,000, and the Department of Agriculture estimating the cost of fences in the country to be $1.75 billion in 1871, a number almost equal to the national debt. Coupled with the fact that these fences were quick to deteriorate, the settlement of the West slowed until an acceptable and affordable fence material could be found. This problem would be solved by barbed wire, of which many historians contend the invention of barbed wire has contributed more to Western economic progress than any other single factor. By 1870, a barbed wire boom had taken storm across the United States. Hundreds of different patents had been filed for barbed wire fences, and miles of every variation were being made every day. Washburn and Moen saw this booming market and made the single biggest decision of their time, buying the patent for barbed wire from the Illinois farmer Joseph F. Glidden, whose creation became the standard across America for decades.
In this presentation, we will be discussing industrial capitalism through the barbed wire industry in Worcester and the Washburn and Moen Manufacturing Company, and arguing for the protection of consumers and workers by unionization and regulation of corporations. Industrial capitalism combines the industrial production, mechanized manufacturing processes, and widespread use of machinery of industrialism with the private ownership of the means of production in a market-driven economy of capitalism. Washburn's attempts at monopolization of the wire industry through patents and through merging, utilization of vertical integration, harm to consumers by removing competing manufacturers to force them to pay an exponentially increased price, endangerment of workers, and wage cuts resulting in unionization mirrored the development of industrial capitalism and the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution.
In 1874, Joseph Glidden sold half of his ownership share of his patent to Isaac L. Elwood, forming the Barbed Fence Company. Elwood championed the mass production of barbed wire via the introduction of steam power and automatic barbing machinery. Their partnership worked toward the accomplishment of one primary goal: to monopolize the wire barb industry through patents. In 1876, Glidden sold the other half of his share to Washburn, who then partnered with Elwood to continue working towards monopolization by controlling the production and price of barbed wire. Through the purchase of conflicting patents, injunctions, and threats, Washburn and Elwood successfully established their bottom patent, an integral component of the monopolization of the industry. As a result, their competitors were required to obtain a license before resuming their manufacture of barbed wire. Such licenses delineated terms for the payback of past damages, future royalties, limitations on production, and price-fixing agreements. With 41 of these licenses issued by late 1881, Washburn and Elwood were paid a total of around $335,000 from their competitors. In the following years, however, the partnership discovered that controlling the industry through a patent monopoly was not feasible long-term. They did not have the money nor the time to keep up with the number of manufacturers that did not acquire licensing and sold illegally, the number of legal licenses administered, and the price each individual license charged. Consequently, the price of barbed wire sank to 3 1/4 cents per pound in 1889 from an average of 10 in 1881. This average of 10 cents a pound was contentious for Washburn in its own right, with Western and Iowan farmers suing the company for raising prices after their acquisition of the bottom patent. Before Washburn's competitors were required to enter into price-fixing agreements with the company, many sold barbed fencing at 6 or 7 cents per pound. Following the change, Washburn and Elwood sold at 7 3/4 cents a pound, with a profit margin added each transaction from manufacturer to wholesaler, wholesaler to retailer, and retailer to consumer. This illustrates how corporations harm consumers by forcing them to pay a much higher price for a good than what it is worth in the form of middleman fees. At the same time, the railroad system was expanding across the nation and combining isolated regional and local markets into one vast market. Because of this, and the ability of manufacturers who employed vertical integration in their operations to increase efficiency, exercise greater control, reduce costs, and hold more market power, smaller processing companies were pushed out of the industry by 1890. For Washburn and Elwood, this key business strategy of industrial capitalism achieved what they had not been able to with patents: the purification of barbed wire manufacturing through sole production by a small number of vast companies, and the near impossibilities of new manufacturers of the product to enter the market. The eventual monopolization of the wire industry would come from John W. Gates, who pushed for a merger of barbed wire manufacturers led by Elwood. Though complications arose with his original plan, the American Steel and Wire Company was incorporated in 1898, comprising I.L. Elwood Manufacturing Company and 5 other firms. The success of this new company was immense, enabling Gates to continue buying out competitors in the industry. Finally, in 1899, Gates finalized negotiations with the Washburn and Moen Manufacturing Company, purchasing their largest competitor and achieving a monopoly in the wire industry.
Within the city of Worcester, there existed a labor union, the International Molders Union of North America, with its chapter being called Local Number 5. Throughout the history of Washburn and Moen, multiple strikes were attempted, though nearly every single one failed to bring anything to fruition. The corporation continually reduced the wages of their workers, and strikes followed. In 1871, there was a mass reduction of hours, but the workers conceded. Following that, in 1880, a 45-day strike occurred in December due to wages being cut by 10%. In 1890, workers struck once again due to wage reduction. In a strange policy, the male workers at the factory were forced to train the female workers. In addition, the media of the time did nothing to benefit these striking workers. All across Worcester, workers had collectivized into unions to fight for their rights, but newspapers, that bear in mind still exist today, such as Worcester Telegram, promoted anti-unionism as well as an open shop mentality. What is an open shop mentality? Within labor history, an open shop is considered a business that will hire workers regardless of their union status, and to quote labor historians Robert E. Ware and James B. Hanlon, an open shop is thus unorganized and non-union, while in contrast, a closed shop is one where union membership is required. Along with wage cuts, Washburn and Moen was not without labor violations. In Kerrigan v. Washburn and Moen, it was revealed that the company failed to properly label storage units containing hazardous fluids and to install safety rails that would have prevented employees from falling into them. The company was again proven as failing to properly ensure worker safety in Gustafson v. Washburn and Moen, where an employee perished after sustaining injuries on the job when there were modifications to the ground outside the factory without any kind of warning signs.
Throughout the 19th century, Worcester, Massachusetts was transformed into a thriving industrial center of the nation and world due to its great success in barbed wire production, championed by the Washburn and Moen Manufacturing Company. This presentation analyzed how the company's development typified key features of industrial capitalism, including monopolization, vertical integration, and labor exploitation. The economic harm that befalls consumers when a monopoly individually controls the sale of a product is great, as they are forced to pay a substantial extra amount for the same product except with the profit margins from the manufacturer, wholesaler, and retailer added. Similarly, vertical integration that removes a large amount of competing companies from the market can lead to higher prices for consumers due to less competition, as well as reduced choice and lower quality. Along with consumers, workers also suffered in industrial capitalism, facing wage cuts, unsafe working conditions, and repercussions for unionization in the Industrial Revolution. As such, we argue that regulations for consumer protection and workers' rights are crucial for the well-being of the people, particularly concerning the restrictions of monopolies to form or the restrictions of them to charge unfair prices, the ability of workers to unionize, and the requirement of companies to provide livable wages and safe working environments.